Okay, so now let's kind of go into so these questions are understanding business value. I feel like I write blog posts about this all the time, but it'll be good to talk through. And I'm looking through the questions here, and a lot of them have to do with SDE versus EBITDA. EBITDA is earnings before interest, taxes, deductions, and amortization. Kind of meaningless to say out loud for most people. SDE is seller's discretionary earnings. The two are related, they are not the same. So let's just start with like why are we even discussing these numbers? And I just want to make it what is SDE? What is EBITDA? Let's just make it even simpler. They're just measures of how profitable you are. And we talk about it all the time because we're always talking about multiples of SDE and multiples of EBITDA. It's just different considerations for how profitable a business is. And depending on how your business runs, you may want to use one measure over another. If an owner is very involved in their business and they pay themselves quite a bit, you probably want to use seller's discretionary earnings. And that is a measure of profitability that's very direct to what does the seller compensate themselves and all of the things that are beneficial to them as the owner of the business. Usually, as you get to a bit larger businesses, and if it has a manager in particular who can run the day of the business, then it makes sense to use EBITDA because EBITDA is not adding back the seller's personal compensation. Again, that is the key difference is that SDE will also add back the owner's compensation. Oftentimes, you can kind of measure SDE and EBITDA, use either in the same business. And this is an important distinction because when we talk about what is a business worth and it's like multiples of SDE and multiples of EBITDA, I will tell a business owner sometimes, hey, you are probably worth 3 times your seller's discretionary earnings. And then they will say, well, I heard that I am worth 6 times my EBITDA. And I won't correct them that it's EBITDA because who really cares? Only Wall Street people do. And both are true because for seller's discretionary earnings, you will go through the financials and you will add back earnings before interest. You'll add back interest expense. You'll add back tax expense. Only if it's like to like state, federal taxes and things like that. Payroll taxes is not going to be added back. So you're going to add back taxes. If you have depreciation expense, you're going to add that back. If you have amortization expense, you're going to add that back. And got it. We just have net income plus all those things. Now we have EBITDA. Then we're going to go back and we're going to add back owner's compensation, the salary the owner officer pay for one owner. And that is now seller's discretionary earnings. Plus in both, if you're like expensing auto things through the business, we'll add that back. Maybe some more personal oriented vacation, some travel or meals. We'll add that back in both cases. But in SDE, it's like EBITDA plus the owner's compensation piece. So if we're in a small business and let's say your profits are, 300,000 and you pay yourself 200,000, well, your SDE is 500,000 and your EBITDA is 300,000. And so it could be a case where, the business is still worth the same whether you start by measuring SDE versus EBITDA, right? It doesn't change what the business fundamentally does or is or how it works. But now it's worth a certain amount. And if the multiplier for a larger number will be less. So typically you will multiply EBITDA more times than you will need to multiply SDE. So that can be a point of contention where it's like, what is SDE? It's like, for lack of a better way to explain, it's EBITDA plus owner's compensation. And that's why the multiple on SDE is typically lower than the multiple on EBITDA because SDE is basically adding back another thing and is a bigger number. Sometimes that's not the case. Again, if the business is bigger and the owner really doesn't work in there, they don't have a compensation factor directly to themselves anymore. But that's kind of the main difference. And that's is like really confusing to people when I tell them your multiple is 3 and they're like, I was expecting 6. And it's like, we're still getting to the same overall value regardless. Okay. Yeah. Does revenue matter or is cash flow ultimately more important? Cash flow is ultimately more important. Absolutely. I mean, this goes back to what we talked about earlier with like, I hear things are really like my industry is hot and everyone wants to buy me. I'm so popular. Great. Yeah, I mean, you're probably popular because you have cash flow. In the world of business, I would say cash flow is how we measure popularity, which is great about business. We can measure popularity very easily. But essentially, look, would you rather own a $12 million business that pays you you can only get 50 grand out of it because you're kind of breaking even though you're really big? Or would you rather own like a business that does 5 million in revenue and you got really great margins because you're maybe services and you put a million in your pocket? You'd absolutely just go off of a million in my pocket. So revenue is not as important as cash flow. Cash flow is way more important. Yeah. Now, okay, well, the one exception here is that your revenue size may open the door to more buyers who are interested in larger businesses, because you're doing 10 million versus 5 million for a business. That $10 million business it is bigger by definition. And sometimes buyers will, be interested in that. So it may open up the buyer pool, but I still think you'd be better off with $1 million business. Yeah, you'll probably make more money from that. But the size can kind of determine who might be interested in buying you, and there may be more buyers if you're just through just sheer force of being bigger. Okay, so some other things for value that like I get asked of, like, oh well, I have this, aren't I valuable? So let's kind of go through them. I have recurring revenue, aren't I more valuable? Yep, absolutely. I have a scorecard on when I do business valuations, and like if you are actually, making the same money every year because you got contract, great. But remember, recurring revenue doesn't mean that you just like make the same amount of money each year. It means that there's a customer that pays you each year and they don't change. It's the stickiness of a customer's revenue. Not just do you make money each year. Customer concentration also, yes, if you have low customer concentration, that's really good. That will help your value, right? So we have like your business is worth probably between like your SDE or EBITDA times some number. If you have low customer concentration, you are going to be on the higher end of that range. So that absolutely does help. But can you prove it? Can you show me a customer list and have a sales report that shows me no one is more than 15% of my sales? That's the trick. Does having a general manager help? Does it increase the value of your business? No, but it really helps you sell the business. So much so that the reason why I wouldn't say it increases the value per se is because expenses go up with a GM salary, which means cash flow goes down, which means the value of your business kind of as a wash. It hurts the cash flow, but it probably washes out on like the qualitative aspects of like, oh well, this is just a better run business that's worth more, but then it's worth more with less cash flow. So kind of wash it out. Where it really helps you is a buyer's going to look at your business, and if you are doing everything, I mean, like, there's a bunch of owner risk, and I want to reduce my perceived value of your business by what it would take for me to pay myself or to put a manager in. So the buyer is going to kind of make that adjustment anyway. And so oftentimes a buyer has a much lower value to the business than the business owner, because the business owner knows everything. There's no risk to the owner. There's no owner risk to the actual owner. But there is risk to the buyer. But having a general manager, that risk is reduced. And all of a sudden, the buyer kind of views the value at the same thing. And then when you're negotiating, you're trying to like shake your hand about doing a deal, having a general manager makes that a lot easier. And so I would say it is probably, generally good for your valuation quantitatively. Sometimes it can be a wash, but it will absolutely help you get that business sold and be very attractive to a lot more people. But I have all my systems are documented. That makes it more sellable. I wouldn't say it necessarily makes it more. It does make it a little bit more valuable, but it is marginal. It will help it sell. It will make the transition a lot easier. It will make your business better, which will help you run things better, have better systems, grow the business. That's where I think the value is. If I were to show someone, here's all the SOPs, pay me $100,000 more for this business, that's not going to fly. But it is good to have. And just as a business owner, I would say you should have one as a business owner too, because it will help you make your business better if you have it documented. Because you're going to document things and you're going to be like, that doesn't make any sense. And then you're going to fix it and your business will be better. And then that will make it more valuable. Equipment condition as a value driver, you want to just hit the sweet spot of good condition, but not old equipment. That's probably ideal. New equipment is good, right? New equipment will make you more valuable. So I want to answer this by saying good and new equipment makes you more valuable. Yep, that's true. However, generally what I see happening when you have a bunch of new equipment is you're now carrying debt on that equipment. And then when you go to sell the business, you need to pay off that debt. and then the cash value to you is less, even though the business is worth more. Now, that may not necessarily be the case for you. It really depends on how much debt you're carrying. So overall, it makes the business more valuable. The cash impact to you at the end of the sale, that's kind of tough to answer really quick. But what will hurt you is if you have old equipment that needs to be replaced soon, because then that is going to kill a lot of your value, because a buyer will be like, I'm going to buy this business and then I'm going to need to invest and take on more debt to buy more equipment. What am I really buying here? So, old equipment is kind of getting to a point where it's like, you're buying a business that doesn't have the equipment that it needs to operate, because someone's going to, it does have it, but that person's going to need to buy a whole bunch of new stuff. So then what's the difference of them? They just start a new business, buy all that equipment new anyway. Now all they really need to buy is just like some know-how and some market presence. And then that becomes the value of your business. So avoid really old equipment. You need to have some lifespan left, a good chunk of lifespan left on the equipment that you have.